You are listening to the North American Kings podcast, your traditional masculinity training ground. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski, founder of North American Kings LLC, a leadership development company based in Cincinnati, Ohio. As we all know, the man brand has taken an absolute beating over the past few decades, and it's our mission to change that. We're going to do that by helping you join the fight to reclaim traditional masculine values. Welcome to headquarters. Training starts now. Welcome back to the training ground, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. On this special post-Thanksgiving episode of the show, I want to take the opportunity to thank you, our listeners, for your support. Without you, this show is meaningless. So we appreciate the time that you will afford us while you're driving, while you're at the office, around the house, or wherever you've decided to tune in. Also, I would like to apologize for the programming lapse that we had during last cycle. You guys all know that my first priority is family. And while we've gotten extremely lucky with regards to illnesses and scheduling conflicts over the last year that we've been doing this November has been absolutely crazy. Everyone in the house, but yours truly, was sick during this past cycle. And then we're talking earaches, stomach bugs, the works. Luckily, it wasn't COVID, but still took the family out of commission. So lots of crazy nights, coaxing medicine into kids, the whole nine. So I apologize. I know I've mentioned in conversations that I've had with my wife about needing a down weekend. Well, wish granted. But I do want to state though that should we have tried to squeeze an episode into our normal time frame, I don't believe that the quality would have been worth your time. And we are absolutely 100% committed to quality on this show. So I want to thank you for your patience and I want to welcome you back. But since we are right off this Thanksgiving holiday, I would like to dedicate this episode to some of the things that we should be very grateful for this holiday season. But I want to start off in second place after our listeners are our sponsors, Naked Armor Razors and Wet Shave Gear. This company showed some very early faith in our mission, and we're willing to help legitimize us with their support. For that, we will be forever grateful. I'm also grateful for the amazing straight razor that they sent us, not as a freebie, but as a customer before they came on as a sponsor. I approached these guys, and they were 100% with it. So after almost a year, this blade is still giving me the best shave I've ever gotten. And today, I'd like to introduce their new Esclabar Damascus straight razor with its unique water pattern ebony handle and Damascus steel blade. This elegant razor speaks to superior balance and ultimate class and quality. Get yours today at nakedarmor.com. Please note the website change. That's nakedarmor.com. Don't forget to use coupon code KINGS15 at checkout and get it or anything else in their online store for an extra 15% off. Enjoy the highest quality shave you'll ever give yourself. That's nakedarmor.com. All right, we have a ton to be thankful for. Now, in most cases, it's about whether or not we choose to see those things or not. Now, it reminds me of something that my father said to me when I was a lot younger. And he said it at a time when I didn't quite comprehend the message, but it rang true throughout the rest of my adult life. He said, Glenn, I will always be able to find something to be proud of you for, even if it's only that you were able to get up and brush your teeth that morning. Now, at face value, that sounds a little sad, doesn't it? But his words carried a lot of weight. That was my father saying that no matter what, that he'd be glad that I was his son and that his love for me would endure, even if the only redeeming thing about me was that I could brush my teeth. Now, my father wasn't always one for awe-inspiring words, so rather than inspire, his words fell on me like a blanket, and I could still feel them today. I could feel them, but they were like a protection more than a call to action, right? I didn't feel like charging the hill, but I knew he was there. Very powerful thing. And like my father in this case, sometimes we do need to look for the things that we should be thankful for. Right? If my only redeeming quality is that I was able to brush my teeth, well, you know what? That's you had to look for that. And sometimes it does feel that we need to look for the things to be thankful for. We can be thankful for our families, regardless of how well we get along with them. Believe me, with as polarizing of a personality as I have, I don't get along with everyone I'm related to. It's going to happen. But there's love. They are family. They are family, and they do deserve love for the influence that they've had on you. These people have helped make you the person that you are today, whether or not it's been a great example to follow or something that you've tried purposely to avoid. They've had an impact. Sometimes it's where we live. Here in the United States, I'm very thankful for the country I live in. There's a lot to be improved about, within the United States, but at its core, this country is good. That's why people keep coming here. The world would be a far worse place right now if the United States never came into being. The reason Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays, it's tenfold. There's so much to appreciate about this holiday. Thanksgiving is a pure holiday in its meaning. One's so purely true that many countries have their own version of this for various cultural reasons. So it's not even like we celebrate here in America for a very specific event, but everybody seems to have that one, hey, let's just give thanks. Every country seems to have it, right? So let's call a spade a spade. A day to give thanks is a good holiday. Now, generally, Thanksgiving and Black Friday are also thought of as both a combined unit, but somehow they remain a little separate. Over the past 10 years, you've seen this happen. I know I've seen this happen. Now, I am a rigorous defender of Thanksgiving in my household. We do not put up Christmas decorations until at least after Black Friday. And we keep things very fall-oriented up until the very last minute. We've also seen that the Black Friday shopping tradition, we've also seen it encroaching closer and closer to Thanksgiving. Now, in some cases, it's even crept into Thursday. However, most people I've known have that take part in these festivities, they don't do that until they're done celebrating Thanksgiving itself. And for the few who do, only shop when the feast is over. Right? Thanksgiving is a pure holiday. Once we recognize the thin barrier between Thanksgiving and Black Friday, there's really no commercialization of Thanksgiving. There's no required gift exchanges. There's no religious intonations to the day itself. It's usually just great food and football. Now, why is this the case? Thanksgiving in America started shortly after our founding as a country. However, it didn't take off as a tradition until almost 20 years later. Now, Thanksgiving, in a secondary way, is a celebration of the United States' rejection of collectivism. And I mean socialism, utilitarianism, and communist functions. All right? I gotta love that. But that recognition has allowed for this country to flourish and become the reigning superpower in an extremely short amount of time. Like China, Russia, Germany, and even England have been around for centuries. Right? The land of the United States wasn't even colonized, by the English until May, 1607. And we've come a long way since that landing. The colonization of this country wasn't a smooth ride. Now, there were several points in our story as a country where this whole thing could have ended very abruptly. However, we can say this: our country was founded by survivors, rugged men and women with grit and a survival instinct and a willingness to take risk for incredible gain and new opportunities. That's not something we want to forget. An article from HistoryNet.com by Charles W. Sasser gives a very clinical account of the early years of this country. The article is titled, "How Collectivism Nearly Sunk Early Colonies." Now, I have read and heard counter-arguments from America-hating liberals who think Thanksgiving is a celebration of everything that's wrong with this country. Now, what I respect about this article is that the same factual points are made by the guy saying that collectivism nearly sunk our early colonies as the blue-blooded, liberal, America-hating folks who think there's nothing positive that this country's provided the world, or that the settlers provided the Native Americans, which we know is factually incorrect. They were approached, and they actually made mutually beneficial alliances, both the Indians and the Pilgrims. So on a factual basis, a lot of it is agreed upon, but the conclusions that people have made over the course of this evolution are obviously different. But with regards to the history, the points they make are actually quite similar, right? Now, and I appreciate that this piece that we're going to cite here today was able to actually talk about those points and still come to the same conclusion, right? Because that's what happened, right? This isn't a fluff piece about America. It's a very clinical description with an obvious conclusion. Now, this article recounts a grittier history of the early settlements than you may remember from your early days in history. Hell, I don't know what kids are learning today, so this may be new for some folks, right? The English colony to find its way to Virginia was led by John Smith. Now, a large part of that workforce sent over to help colonize were indentured servants, all right? Now, these folks signed on to work off their expensive passage to the New World over the course of, let's say, 7 years. I know it's 7, but I don't know if there were some varying, some guys did it longer, some people did it shorter. I don't know. But at the end, they were freed and would be given a stewardship over about 50 acres of land. Now, that land would still be owned by the Virginia Company, but they would hold it. There were no inheritance rights, but it's still a solid gig, right? 50 acres to do what you need to, and until you died, everything's fine. However, these indentured servants weren't really connected to the Virginia Company's mission. It was a profit-based expedition. They were here. That was their particular goal. End of story. The folks running the operation were responsible for actually making the colony work, and they saw that the indentured servants were somewhat lazy. Now, from the article, quote, having no stake in their efforts, most indentures and free men lapsed into indolence and fell into bickering. A fifth of the party's members did most of the work. The rest leached off of the common stores. And I mean common stores, it's referenced several times where all of the crops that were created would actually be pooled collectively and then divvied out to everybody in equal measure. Now, this led to a lack of proper supplies. Only 2 small fields were productive, and supply ships had to be sent back to England just to bring back provisions. Now, it took John Smith a year to start cracking down. At one point, he said, and to quote the article, "He who will not work will not eat." Not a bad standard to hold. However, it was 3 years later when the new lieutenant governor, Sir Thomas Dale, arrived when things started to actually change. He was a hard man and he made enemies. But once things were stable, he was able to lighten up a bit and things really then started to take off. He kept the same structure, but what he decided to do was assign each adult male 3 acres to do whatever he wanted with. Right? The age-old adage that dignity, that there's dignity in work. We found that out in the earliest stages of American life. That's what these folks found. And they were able to work and produce as much as they wanted without the burden of those who would not work for themselves to weigh them down. But this wasn't the first appearance of Thanksgiving. Let's make this point perfectly clear. They did have a celebration when things started to go well. But the first Thanksgiving was actually held up farther north at Plymouth Colony in Pennsylvania. It was a very similar story, set several years later. Now, famine, disease, war, and war with the Indians caused some issues. Now, there were also some alliances made with some local Indians. right? So that's the part that some people like to forget, that the early pilgrims, the early settlers made alliances with some Indian tribes to give them strategic advantage over the other Indian tribes. So the article points out that this wasn't a time where there was like a brilliant peace between these folks. In fact, they were weary allies, even to each other for a time. The nature of their relationship is rather insignificant. They did hold that they would mutually benefit each other. You know, that they had a feast is all we really need to know. And that all sources say that this happened. In 1620, the Mayflower set sail for England with a crew of 30 crew and 102 settlers. Now, you may recall that on this voyage, that the crew of the Mayflower came up with a new agreement that they called the Mayflower Compact. Now, this has been described as America's first example of self-government, but I like to see this as a sign that these folks meant business. They weren't here as workers for some larger enterprise. They were here to make a better life for themselves and their community, and they were going to get it done. You know, they referenced Plato and Aristotle and in this compact where these people were here to self-govern. They were here to stay. They were here to make things happen. Now, from the article, Governor John Garner collapsed in the fields and died in April 1621. All right. The colonists elected Bradford to replace him, or Governor Bradford, who was the original author of the Mayflower Compact. Now, friendly Pokanoket, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, Indians helped the colonists grow enough crops that summer to survive the winter, whose start all hands marked with a celebratory dinner. So this is the first Thanksgiving that we want to that we actually recorded, right? It was the fall 1621, right? We worked hard, we turned it around, and this celebration, was because they didn't starve the first time. But the colonists realized that this wouldn't last, and the planting season that began just a few months later in 1622, colonists voted out collectivism and started the real American ideal. Everyone was given a parcel of land, and to quote the article and Bradford, quote, the change had very good success, for it made all hands industrious. So as much corn was planted than otherwise would have been by any other means. Any general want or famine hath not been amongst them to this day. End quote. That's the beauty of requiring that people become self-reliant. Right? Necessity is the mother of invention. When you absolutely need to make sure that it gets done, who has the most invested in success of that thing, whatever that task is? You do. Now, what they did, they said, hey, you're responsible for making your own food. Good luck. And believe me, there was a barter system. There was an early economy. So if somebody had made more, they could sell or trade to somebody who happened to make maybe just a little bit less. Right? Or heck, I might not be a great farmer, but if I'm a great peddler or if I'm a good carpenter, well, you know what? I'm going to trade to the farmers and to those people who are good at that. And that's how we had an early economy start. But it was all because of the work that I did that was able to be worth that product to somebody else. I celebrate Thanksgiving for these very reasons. I've traded away Christmas holidays at work to ensure that I was able to celebrate Thanksgiving properly. Christmas, even with the religious significance, has been wildly commercialized. As far back as I can remember, because we either don't teach the religious significance of it, or people actively choose not to worship that way or acknowledge the season for its religious significance, what has been left to a secular public is largely the commercialization. Santa Claus, all this, again, Santa Claus, Christmas trees, presents. It is the season of giving, but it's turning into the season of want. Why would it be something special if it seems like it's only there for businesses to profit from? Now, this is not a case against Christmas, and it's not a case, against the religious part. It's, and I'm not even trying to get you to go worship or even celebrate Christmas religiously. The idea here is that, we have to choose to observe these holidays. Thanksgiving is a lot simpler than that. Thanksgiving has the benefit, even of its name. It's hard to pile on a holiday that's so simply named. It's like that episode of Parks and Rec on NBC. If you guys have seen that, I know it's been off the air for a little while. This episode recalls like a doomsday cult called the Reasonableists. And the general point is made that it's very hard to attack them as the doomsday cult that they are, because publicly you're attacking a group that's called a very unassuming name. Hey, I can't go out and say, hey, those reasonableists are really unreasonable guys, right? I mean, it sounds cheap, but it is very effective. And politicians and public orders, they will all tell you the same thing. That's a hard thing to break. We saw that earlier in 2020 with Black Lives Matter. It's very hard to denounce a group that wants to destroy the nuclear family, that has a bunch of other things attached to it, and still say, hey, I support Black lives, and I don't want Black people to be oppressed in any way, but I don't have to like this organization. It's the same exact thing. You say that, even as rational as you may want to be, well, unfortunately, you don't like a group called Black Lives Matter. All right. So the name doesn't speak to their purpose, and I mean like the reasonableists in this situation, and it's it becomes defensive. You're on the defensive for having actually attacked them, right? In this case, Thanksgiving, the purity of this holiday, its intentions are what make it defensible. It's hard to pile on Thanksgiving. Why would you not want to give thanks? Right? Most people don't. With Christmas, you do have to contend with the secular culture and the non-Christian population. So there's already a bedrock of folks who aren't into this. But Thanksgiving works largely for everybody, and it largely goes unappreciated. I'm grateful for our history as a country. With the issues of masculinity as our core issue on this show, I am happy that our country is full of real men accomplishing great things throughout history. More importantly, I'm glad that the forces that have allied against this cause are relatively young. Masculinity has been something that men have been encouraged towards up until about the 1960s. That's when things started to shift a little bit. So we have a strong foundation of masculinity as a world, and particularly as a nation. When you see revisionists trying to go back and redefine things that happened in the past, this should be of particular concern to everyone. The 1619 Project, as an example, has actively trying to go back, and they're trying to go back and to redefine when America was founded, and they're trying to add false context as to why we were founded. Now, I'm not going to go into the specifics today, but know that the core subject matter of the 1619 Project was refuted as historically false by its publishers, by historians that have looked at it, by even the people that wrote it and said, hey, this is what we want to say. We want to give another case for this. They're stating that it's an alternative view, which means false. Just so you guys know, particularly when we go back and look at history. Now, despite that, it still got a Pulitzer Prize and therefore is now considered eligible to be taught in schools. Again, go look for yourselves. But when you have folks that are trying to go back to redefine history, often those people have a point to make, and often those folks aren't trying to dredge up real history. They're trying to shape the way we look back at ourselves. And it's particularly damaging when we're trying to unify as a country. A lot of times we've talked about this before when building bonds of brotherhood. Having a common history and having a common experience is something that will bring people together. When we're already socially frayed, to go back and destroy that history is destroying one of the very few things that we still have left to bind us. That's why we make a big deal about this stuff. Now, throughout 2020, we saw people trying to take down Confederate statues. Now, there are cases for and against tearing down of statues, particularly those of people of historical significance. Regardless of whether you agree or disagree with why they are significant, the fact that they were is important. Now, maybe not enough to make a statue out of them, but you guys get the point. Now, in 2020, we saw cities burned, people killed, and the fraying of what normal people would call law and order. Our sitting vice president started bail funds for quote-unquote protesters or peaceful protesters who were jailed for burning down cities across the country. This is not hyperbolic. That's what happened. And you guys can go look that up in any source you guys want. You know, VP bail fund would work. Now, our VP also went so far as to visit the hospital bed of a black man who was shot by the police in Kenosha, Wisconsin. This guy was a rapist who was armed while he attacked not only the woman that he had assaulted, but also the cops while he tried to escape the scene of the crime. Another note, the car that he was trying to escape in was occupied by this woman's small children. So we've got a gentleman who just raped a woman, who's fighting the cops while he's armed, and he's trying to effectively kidnap children as he escapes his violent altercation with the police. And that only at this point where he's trying to start the car was he actually shot by the cops. And believe me, I said shot. Okay, this guy still lives. Jacob Blake is not someone we should be trying to emulate. We can agree. Can we agree on that? I mean, I think we can we? And if not, I don't care about your feelings on this. You are wrong to want to be like a rapist. The worst part of this was that he survived. Now, I don't wish death on the guy, but it was completely it was a completely justified shooting, and him not dying in the process, you know, that was like the only oh, okay. Right? I mean, all the public investigations said that the shooting was found to be completely legitimate. Right? Him dying in the process would have been a reasonable expectation. Right? If you said armed guy, let's take the color of him out of this. Armed guy just rapes a woman and is fighting off the police with a knife, and he's trying to escape in a vehicle that is occupied by small children. You would assume that person would be shot. Anybody would. Right? The cops should do something to not endanger the kids in the car and to apprehend this guy. So the officer who shot Mr. Blake hasn't been apprehended because the trial never took place. The Kenosha DA found that he was justified in his use of force. Great. But even had Jacob Blake died, the outcome would have been the exact same. You heard me right. It would have been the exact same. Corporate media outlets still, to this day, mistakenly tell the public that Jacob Blake died. And there were still violent and wildly destructive riots, not just in Kenosha, Wisconsin, my home state, where this happened, but all over the country. The hapless governor kept the National Guard out of Kenosha before the riots happened, leaving the local authorities overwhelmed. So again, I say, had he died, the result would have been the exact same. It would have been the exact same if it were unjustified. You would think, right? Oh yeah, only the deadly riots that took place where cities were burned would have happened if the guy was just innocent, right? No, he was totally found guilty of this this litany of things that started this case, and he was shot for very good reason. And all of a sudden, oh, you would think there was peace? Absolutely not. The city burned. All right. Now that's where this whole Kyle Rittenhouse case started. The media's lies about this, all verified by the courts, are astounding. This kid has ties to the city, and he only lived 20 minutes away, but just over the border. He worked in the city, had family in the city. His own father lived in the city. He was given his weapon in Wisconsin and was legally allowed to possess and have that weapon. Again, all verified by the courts, all told to you by traditional media sources to be the exact opposite. All right? During the riots, Mr. Rittenhouse, still armed with his rifle, was separated from the group that he was with, which was originally there to defend local businesses from being burnt to the ground. In that time, a convicted child rapist who was there to cause trouble decided to single out Mr. Rittenhouse and threaten his life. From video that you have access to, you have access to this, and that I've seen. I saw it the day it happened because I keep track of Wisconsin news as best I can. You can see Mr. Rittenhouse retreating from multiple encounters with Mr. Rosenbaum until he was brought to the ground and accosted by Mr. Rosenbaum and by a man named Anthony Huber and Gage Grosskreutz. Now, Mr. Huber was seen swinging his skateboard like an axe at Kyle Rittenhouse's head, which from riots that we had seen elsewhere in 2020, we know have been the actual cause of deaths in those other assaults. Mr. Grosskreutz, who was an ex-felon, also had a gun that he admitted on the stands to pointing at Mr. Rittenhouse's face before he was shot. At the end of this struggle, which you can see on video, Mr. Rosenbaum and Huber end up dead, and Mr. Grosskreutz has his bicep shot. Now, by a rifle, it's a wrecked bicep. After the killing incident, you can see Mr. Rittenhouse get up and approach several armed tactical vehicles containing law enforcement agents with his hands up, trying to surrender. Now, they drive by for some reason, and I would imagine it's because they were not aware of what just happened or they couldn't hear him. But you can see that he's actively trying to surrender to authorities after what just happened. It is my opinion, seeing the video immediately after the riots took place, that this was a clear case of self-defense. Now, people argue that he instigated the fight by bringing an assault rifle to this situation. That is a legal fallacy. Just because you have a weapon doesn't mean people get to threaten your life because you have one. All right? We have open carry law here in the United States that happens. I could go anywhere with a gun on my hip that anybody can see. I can't be attacked for that. All right? And that's exactly what these guys did. Mr. Rosenbaum even claimed as much and actively attacked this kid, following him to 2 locations before things ended. Now, I'm not here to relitigate the case. I want to express my thanks to God himself that the case fell this way. I'm not downplaying that these 2 men are dead and one is maimed. Regardless of their lengthy criminal records, death isn't something to be passed around lightly. No, I'm thankful that the right to defend yourself is still legitimized in the law. That's what this case that's what this case is really about. Yes, it was a murder case, but ultimately it was about whether or not you can defend yourself during a riot. If you want to go just that specifically, go to any concealed carry course. I encourage you to do that just for doing it. I encourage you to go get that license, be able to defend yourself. But when you do, you're going to find that the material is mostly about when you can use your weapon. There is certainly some elements of how to use your weapon, but it's primarily focused on when you can and when you can't, for the sole purpose of protecting you from these legal issues. Now, understandably, there are a couple of gray areas, but that speaks to the confusion people face now about the nature of self-defense law and when it can be used or not. The prosecutors lied. Yes, lied to the jury during their closing arguments, saying that Kyle Rittenhouse lost his right to self-defense when he brought the gun to the riot. That is a lie. The jury had to see that in order to get through this case. And I hate that we have to get into this, but the prosecutor lies. If there's no rebuttal from the defense, then they have to either know that that's a lie, or they go back into the jury deliberation and somehow figure it out on their own. Right? The prosecutor said that Kyle was too scared to fight these guys with his fists before a shooting. They didn't state that he needed to in this case, but they're implying that there needs to be equal force applied in these cases for self-defense to stick. Great. 3-on-1 fight, and this 17-year-old kid is supposed to use karate or something? That's not how self-defense works. If you know any women, thank your lucky stars that this case fell in this direction. If Kyle had been found guilty, we would have lost our right to self-defense. Now, I know that that's not what the law states, but there's a very clear line here. There's a distinction between the law on paper versus the law in practice. In this case, if the threshold for legal self-defense is set so high that it's impossible to reach, do you really have it? Like this case was perfect. I cannot overstate this enough. I'm not a legal expert. I'm a trained concealed carry person. And looking at this fits every element of self-defense. Right? This kid was armed. That it doesn't matter why he was armed. We like to think that, but it is irrelevant. It doesn't matter that he was in the middle of a riot. He was armed. Okay, that's where the story starts. He was attacked in a manner that was reasonably interpreted as intending death or great bodily harm upon him. Okay, he retreated as far as he could possibly have gone, which was to the ground. Once you're on your back, there's no more retreating. Okay, and if you guys don't understand what retreating means, it means I have to de-escalate. All right, so if I bring a gun to this situation and I'm going to use it, if I actually use it, I have to prove, and Kyle did on video, I have to prove that I de-escalated as best I could. This kid ran away from his attackers. Mr. Rosenbaum in particular followed him to 3 different locations. 2 that I saw on video and 3 that they discussed during the actual trial. All right? He retreated on video from 2 locations, trying to escape this would-be murderer, because he said, I'm going to kill you, over and over again. Followed a guy with a gun and chased him down. This kid runs away. And only when he's brought to the ground does he even think to have his weapon raised. Okay? When you're on your back, there's no more retreating. You cannot possibly retreat anymore. Unless they disengage, which did not happen. He sits up and the 3 big men are still attacking him, and he shoots only those 3 guys. Let's not forget that. If you have your concealed carry license, you'll know you're responsible for every bullet you fire. Now, if I can use deadly force against this guy in front of me, and I shoot and I miss and I hit some stranger behind him, those same principles apply to that person. If I couldn't justifiably kill that person, I'm on the hook for that. Now, every element of self-defense as taught by lawyers and law enforcement agents was followed. I saw that from the video like day one. The only thing that could have been made this more perfect is if these guys had entered Kyle's house that he owned. Right? Outside of that, there's nothing more perfect about the objective elements of this case. Now, this is why this case fell this way. Everything was stacked against this story. The media said that they were black men that were killed. In fact, every one of them was a white guy. Every guy involved was a criminal that was actively attacking him. He didn't open fire on the collective protesters, which is how the media outlets tried to spin this. Right? There's a large populace that wants this kid dead. Death threats were sent to the major players involved in this case, including the judge, and there were death threats against the judge and his children. The fact that this even went to trial shows how far we've come in this society. Mob rule should have nothing to do with the courts, but you are starting to see how this barrier is starting to fade. It is an open and shut case of self-defense. This still had to go through the entire legal process. Had it fallen the other way, and this kid been sacrificed at the altar of rioter politics, it would have been so hard to, quote, justifiably defend yourself that it would make it impossible for you to do so. Protecting yourself by using deadly force would have, in effect, become illegal. Women would be at risk. The biggest equalizer in history is the firearm. Almost all women would struggle again to keep me off of them if I decided to assault them. That's a fact. I've spoken to women black belt holders, and they've acknowledged this. All right? So someone who's got the self-defense certification, if you would, the person who has that has said, you know what? If you really wanted to, there's not much I could do. You put a gun in that woman's hand, and now the odds are highly in their favor. But a gun is not meant to be used for non-lethal force. That's the point. All right? If they shot me and didn't kill me, I can still sue them in civil court for damages. That's how the legal system is. If the case goes against this kid, that woman has no recourse against me. She can't kill me because her life would be effectively over for doing so. She can't readily defend herself with anything else. So what's she supposed to do? Just give up? If she has retreated to the point where she can't retreat anymore and can't escape, what's she supposed to do when the law doesn't give her any options? I'm thankful that the law prevailed and I'm allowed to protect my family. Now, this kid didn't flout the laws. He obeyed them to the point of getting through a trial with a hostile media reporting on the other side of this. All right? This passed muster. This was not some, people will tell you that the law wasn't upheld today. Are you sure? I think that's another lie. In fact, the only reason this kid isn't in jail, the reason he isn't dead, is because we've kept his identity and his address secret, but also people would be calling for his head immediately if he were found guilty. All right? Now, and people attacked this judge too. Like, this wasn't a racist judge. He tried a white kid for killing white people. He's a Democrat judge who has a history of being highly respectful of the rights of the accused. Okay, think about that and say it again. It's a Democrat judge, and that's legal. That's how he runs as a judge, as a Democrat, who has a history of being highly respectful of the rights of the accused. So of the perpetrator of the alleged crime, he's very considerate of the criminal in almost every case. Okay? I say almost because I don't know, right? He's got a history. He has a reputation of being this guy, right? So normally people are on the other side of this, right? You don't have a white kid who killed other white people. It's generally a black guy who did something else. And this judge happens to always be on the side of the accused. Okay, you would think that this guy would be the person that Democrats and the left would want on this side of the case. In fact, they tried to take him to the woodshed. They sent death threats to him and his family. Are we starting to see the picture here? The fact that all of those character attributes benefited this kid doesn't take away from the fact that this judge is respectful of most criminals. This guy is not aligned with either case. He was upholding the law against a prosecution team that many believe was shooting for a mistrial because they knew they weren't going to make the case through the law itself. Again, on this episode, I am thankful for this because the ability to defend my family should similar situations unfold, it is my job as a husband and father to protect them. This has happened again through 2020, where bands of roving protesters will descend upon restaurant districts demanding subjugation. Imagine seeing this trouble walking through. Imagine fleeing that area with your family, like you see the mob coming. You say, you know what? I'm out. I'm not dealing with that today. I get my family, like I leave as much cash as I can, walk away, right? I'm fleeing the area only to be stopped and asked, hey, why don't you feel safe in front of this roving band of militant protesters? But what then, right? You're going to stop and answer these people? You better hope and pray that the situation does not escalate. Otherwise, the fight is on. And that's the greater point. I've mentioned before that I don't like pedestrian right-of-way laws, right? Because they go against the natural laws of human nature. It encourages people to act outside of their nature. And in this case, it's to ignore a car heading your way because you have faith that they're going to obey the law and not hit you. Don't worry about danger or the risk to your life. Go ahead and walk. You have the right of way. Sounds dumb to me. But in this situation, these hypothetical protesters, if the situation does escalate, people will defend themselves regardless of the law. That's human nature. We're criminalizing primal instincts, which would be justified under most normal circumstances. To push the applicable law beyond the reasonable bounds of a situation like this, make it illegal for regularly law-abiding citizens to protect their very lives. I'm thankful that we still can. All right, now on to other things to be thankful for. I'm also thankful for men around the world who are still taking care of business. It's time to place another man on the pedestal of manhood to join his fellows in our pantheon of heroes. A story from Fox News, but it's being reported by ABC and most outlets elsewhere because of the purity of this tale. Headline, Michigan girl who survived plane crash says dad protected her. 11-year-old Lainey Perdue is the sole survivor of a plane crash near Mackinac City, Michigan. 4 people were left dead, including Lainey's father, Mike Perdue. The girl's mother, Christina Perdue, told outlets that the daughter's last memory before the crash was that her father was protecting her. Now, details about how Mr. Perdue protected his daughter have still yet to be reported. However, we can all imagine wrapping our children in a protective embrace that, I mean, I can't speak clearly about this. This could have protected her from impact shock or even flying debris or shrapnel, right? This dad's protective bubble that he created around his daughter may very well have been what saved her life. Now, let's be very clear. Lainey was still hospitalized, but she lives. And for his selfless efforts and not shirking his manly duties in the face of a plane crash, we lift up Mike Perdue to the pantheon. May he live forever for his dying sacrifice and for the love he showed his daughter. May we never forget this man and those like him. So, again, I'm thankful for these guys. I'm thankful for the opportunities that we get. I'm also thankful for the opportunities that I get to see all of this preaching work in real time. Okay? I admit, I try to make this show as palatable as possible without making it too preachy. Now, ultimately, it's a show that gives advice on how to make you feel more complete, which lends itself to that particular flaw. My experience comes from research and first-person experience in either making these exact mistakes or recognizing what I was able to avoid and the consequences of those situations. And because I'm not some doctorate, I'm just a real guy who is legitimately onto something and willing to put it out there, I relish when I get the opportunity for confirmation. All right. Now, since we've last spoke, I went out to Portland, Oregon on business. Actually, I mispronounced that. It's Oregon. You know, if you're going out there, it's Oregon, not Oregon. Okay. They will tell you. But I went out there for an audit of a business that we purchased for purposes of this integration. And I need to find ways for all these subsidiaries and our central location to function uniformly. A few days before I, singularly, am about to head out to the West Coast, foreign nation, could have been, right? I'm heading out to unknown territory on my own. I get a call from my boss saying that I was going to actually be going out with a guy that I have a loose relationship with at work. Like, to date, I liked this guy when we talked, but there was really no draw for us to be together. Like, we don't have regular contact at work. So it's not, it's just nothing but pure effort that we would have to invest to make a friendship, for a possible return. Now, believe me, when you get to your mid-30s, sometimes you just decide not to. I did with one of my neighbors for 2 years. He just moved. He and his wife and children just moved. He and I looked at each other a couple times and just decided, you know what? Let's not. You don't want to? No. So, and that's okay. You believe me, that's okay for you to make those decisions. But when forced into a situation with a guy, it helps that there's somewhat of a foundation. So, dude and I head out to Oregon, and I have to say, I came back with a new bro. And I hope it lasts. I do. Now, sometimes these things, like you get like a good first base, like, hey, this friendship's got a lot of potential. Sometimes it fizzles, and I've got confirmation on a host of levels, confirming many of the things during this experience, confirming them that like things that we talked about on the show. Like we talked about building bonds of brotherhood, right? Common interest. We have work together. Okay, sometimes that's where you have to start out. But in particular, we had a common goal in this audit. So now we're a team. Now we have to work together. Great. Next, we have a common experience. We're traveling together. And along the way, we found out that we had other similar experiences, right? We've got a very similar family structure. He's got a stay-at-home wife, kids, the whole nine, right? We have the same religion and particular faith. So we're not just Christians, we're Catholics, right? We have the same politics, etc. Now, I'm going to see if I can get this guy to appear on the show once or twice from time to time, because that prospect actually came up in casual conversation, which we're very excited about. So more to follow on that. But on this trip, we were compromising with each other and making sure the other had what they needed, right? We're providing for each other, right? You notice your travel companion who looks hungry. Guess what? We're stopping for something to eat. Right? You guys are traveling. You have to show up to the same hotel at the same time, right? You want to make sure that everybody's pleased when you get there, right? So dude wants to sightsee for a few hours when we got time to kill before needing to be at the hotel. Well, fine. Let's go on an adventure, right? Dude's about to get into a brawl with a tripping homeless dude in Portland. Well, guess who comes prepared? Now, I've lamented on this show the curse that I feel I have from time to time of being overly prepared for weird situations. It just happened. Validation down to my god clothes. Okay? When I travel, this is how tweaky I can get, okay? Excuse me. I travel in what my friends have jokingly dubbed my action suit, okay? Check this. Baseball hat, sunglasses, t-shirt, jeans, soft shell black jacket, work boots. Okay? That's the action suit. Everything is in its place. I am prepared to walk or hike across the country in this outfit should it be necessary in order for me to get home, okay? I have everything I need on my person. Should I become separated from anything extra, I have the vitals with me, okay? Now, I mentioned clothes in particular because work boots can be extremely comfortable, but there's a trade-off in speed. And, after a long while, if you're not used to them, they're gonna hurt a little bit, right? These boots weren't made for walking, okay? or running in particular. My 9-inch work boots have kept me from rolling ankles. The steel toes have acted as door jams and wedges to keep my tires from spinning, right? They're very functional. I've always said to my wife, who was weirded out that I have more work boots than actual sneakers, that I can't kick a door down in flip-flops. All right? Now, my meaning in that is that your footwear can leave you exposed to risk. All right? If your exposed feet during a hike would be awful. Imagine like leaves and pine needles and bugs and dirt and irritation all like up in your sandals. No, you want hiking boots. You want logger boots like I wear, right? Something. So when I want to be prepared for anything, I write off that risk completely. At the minor inconvenience, maybe my feet might be uncomfortable after 20 hours of being in these work boots. And I've done that and they can get uncomfortable. Like I love taking those boots off, but they're 100% secure when I'm in the fight, when I'm in work, when I'm traveling, right? They can get me through any situation, and believe me, they ain't coming off by accident like sneakers can. All right? I swear this is relevant. So my newfound brother and I decided that we're going to go eat near the airport. Okay. Like there's a shopping district that's like I can hear the airport like off in the distance. And we're like, hey, it's near the hotel. We're going to eat. We decided to eat at a Red Robin because we didn't want to chance a bad experience. You know, we're in like travel mode, right? You just want stuff that's familiar. You just want to eat and then like be ready for anything. Right. And my companion was totally down for this, right? We didn't want to chance like a bad experience and then like want to be hungry, waiting for, we knew we weren't going to eat for at least, it was going to be at least 16 hours before we got a good meal in us. Okay. Like this is the last meal for a while. So we're like, hey, we need to make sure that it's not even like we get it and we're not regretting this decision. So nothing fancy. We're in travel mode. We're going to Red Robin. Now we get to this place. And of course, there's a small wait. We decide we're going to head outside. We're going to wait in front of the window of this place. My friend decides he wants to light up a cigarette, and we start talking. Now, I'm telling a rather in-depth story about wanting to punch a pastor in the face. Okay, and it's a story for the ages, but it happened. And I was telling this story rather animatedly, and bro is tracking this homeless dude who's off to my left, but he's outside of my periffs, okay? Like he's outside of my periphery vision, but I can hear the guy, right? And, you know, he enters my sphere a couple paces closer, all right? So it's not like I wasn't aware of this dude, but anyway, I digress. When you're in a city with a lot of homeless folks, I encourage you not to engage. And I've done this a couple of times before. I'm not going to say I have too much experience with homeless folks, but I want to encourage you not to engage unless you want to be sucked in, and you will. If you start talking, they will talk back. They've got nowhere to be. You do. Okay? Complete silence is what I found works most effectively. Short answers, short no answers, you know, can get you past the being, like if you feel like you're being rude, hey, do you have any spare change? No. You want to talk? No. You got a cigarette? No. Okay? I encourage you, no answers. So this guy kicks over a chair and like the patio set behind me. Okay. Now bro's tracking and I'm mildly aware of this dude. The situation doesn't involve us yet. And remember, right, I'm in do not engage mode. So I keep telling my story as he gets closer. And you guys, if you can see me now, you guys know I'm a hands talker, right? But if, you know, for those of you who are listening, again, you can imagine my hands moving when I talk, right? Well, to me, it looked like the dude was mimicking my hand gestures, which was annoying, but it's not threatening, right? But it was even more evidence that this dude was a little bit not with us. Now, bro is like a step farther into the sidewalk than I am, and this homeless guy passes right in front of him and stops. I may be 3 feet from the guy where bro is 2. Now there's this high noon moment where like things got really quiet, like silent. And brother is staring directly at this guy's eyes, and the homeless dude is squarely facing my companion. Now after this long tense moment, the dude is like dragged away by his girlfriend, and who then yells that she hates him because she hasn't had a hot shower in God knows how long. And I couldn't help but laugh inside about that. It was just, again, the icing on this metaphorical cake. And we continued to track them in silence until they forced several cars to stop in traffic as they stumbled through multiple intersections. Okay? Now, after we are clear, Bro turns to me and is clearly going through adrenaline letdown. All right? This is when you get a spike of adrenaline and you don't get to use it, your body needs to like work off that energy and you remain hyped for too long. And if you guys can see me, a lot of times people's hands shake. I felt this before too. I put my motorcycle down, and it wasn't like a bad episode, but your adrenaline spikes and you get this little shake to you that you can't knock. It's a weird shiver. It's your body trying to work that off without another outlet. Okay? Don't let it freak you out if you get there. Okay? I, in this situation, didn't feel anything. Okay? And it's because of prep. Bro asked me about it, and I had to explain that while he thought things were about to get hairy, he was completely unaware that I had the better angle on the guy, and I had a plan in place. Awesome. Now, homeless dudes come in a variety of flavors. Okay? When you think one is tweaking, you can only imagine what they might be high on. All right? If you think he's not like totally with it, assume dude is on something communicable and assume it's an IV, like a needle drug. Okay? HIV and other like blood-borne diseases spread through homeless communities pretty regularly. All right? So never let them bleed on you. Okay? That's the true in most situations, but especially when this homeless dude's tripping. Now, I mentioned this before. My plan was to plant my 11.5 boot in his sternum if things started to pop off. I had the inside angle on the guy, so he and Bro are a couple feet from me. I've got like 3 feet in front of me, and I can get within 3 feet in a second. All right? It's not that hard, especially if I'm raising my foot. I've shortened that length by most of it, like 75% of that length, in the second it took me to get my foot up. All right? So I had the inside angle and room enough to get my foot up before he closed on my friend. Also, believe me, like your hands tend to be the first things to get cut up during a fight. All right? Now, if you're under the assumption that dude is a homeless drug addict, it's safest to avoid using your fists in that situation. All right? You punch him, he bleeds, you've got cuts or nicks on your hands, well, yeah, you're at risk now. That's how that happens. So because I had all this worked out moments leading up to this standoff, I didn't even feel the adrenaline rush. It was so calculated that my body felt no reason to respond. But also with some of my fighting background, and again, it's not much, but it's there, I know that I get the adrenaline rush in the initial moments of the actual conflict starting. Right? This is good for me because I can remain very calm beforehand and I can make rational decisions without getting swept up in the moment. This has helped me de-escalate situations before and actually get out of fights more often than not. Right? My friend was mildly surprised when I mentioned all this, and we had a good few laughs over it at dinner, but I got confirmation of another point on the building bonds of brotherhood front. A harrowing experience between bros can go a long way in solidifying a friendship. Now, of course, now we need to capitalize on the foundations that we've created. Otherwise, it's almost like a partially built house, right? You can't live in that until you've done some more work structurally and the thing's completed, right? It will take some more effort despite having a very solid foundation. Now, I'm thankful that I continue to get these experiences because my life feels richer for it and because it helps me maintain my vigor with you guys. If you continue to at least hear this, as these situations happen to you, I guarantee that you'll feel richer by taking some of this advice and capitalizing on your masculinity and using it for the people around you. Like I got to do in Portland, like I've gotten to do for the past month with my sick entire family, to hosting Thanksgiving and cooking the meal for everybody who showed up. I am thankful for the life I've given myself and that was given to me by God. So that's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Be thankful for what you guys can, what you guys choose to see. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you guys like this episode, please follow and subscribe for free. We're on Apple Podcasts, Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you get your content. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Christmas. We'll get there. And good luck out there.